Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into one of the most baffling international mysteries of our time. It's a story about a strange affliction that has struck American officials all over the globe, leaving behind a trail of serious injuries and, for a decade now, a whole lot of unanswered questions.
So get this, more than 1,500 U.S. government personnel have been affected. And we're not just talking about officials, we're talking spies, diplomats, and even their families, all hit by this mysterious ailment that we've come to know as Havana syndrome.
And look, these incidents weren't just happening in one spot. They've been reported in 96 different countries. This is not a localized issue. It's a global phenomenon that's been shadowing America's intelligence and diplomatic corps for nearly a decade.
Now, after all these years of searching for answers, investigators might finally have a real physical piece of evidence in their hands. But to really get a grip on why this could be such a huge breakthrough, we have to go back, way back to the beginning, to where this whole mystery started. All right, let's go back. Picture this. The year is 2016. The U.S. has just reopened its embassy in Havana, Cuba. I mean, this is a huge historic moment for diplomacy. But then, just a few months later, American intelligence officers start reporting something deeply unsettling. I want you to imagine hearing this grating, high-pitched sound that only you can hear. It feels like a physical beam is being pointed right at your head, creating this intense, painful pressure. And the person in the very next room? They feel absolutely nothing. This was the bizarre, frankly terrifying experience of the first victims. It left them nauseous, disoriented, and completely scared. So what started out as this weird mystery in Cuba, well, it didn't stay in Cuba. It quickly became clear this was something much, much bigger. These strange incidents started following American officials all over the world, almost like a shadow.
You can see the pattern of how it spread, and it's pretty revealing. After Havana, cases popped up in really strategic places, like Moscow and China. Then, and this is wild, it struck right on the grounds of the White House. Vienna, which is a known hub for global espionage, became such a hotspot that it was second only to Havana in the number of incidents.
And here's what's so crucial. The victims weren't random tourists. They were, overwhelmingly, members of the U.S. national security community. We're talking CIA officers, Defense Department personnel, and State Department employees. The pattern was just undeniable. This wasn't random. It was targeted. So the big question for doctors and scientists was, what in the world was actually happening inside these people's brains and bodies? The symptoms were unlike pretty much anything they'd ever seen before. Medically speaking, the symptoms were consistent and just devastating. It often looked like a traumatic brain injury, but without any physical impact. The long-term effects were life-altering: chronic headaches, vision problems, and this persistent cognitive brain fog. This wasn't just making people sick. You could see it as a strategic blow, forcing some of America's most experienced intelligence officers into early retirement. It was effectively taking them right off the board. This quote from Kate Husband, who was one of the very first victims in Havana, it just really captures the profound and lasting impact of all this. It wasn't just a headache, it was a fundamental change to their lives and their ability to think. But here's where things get really messy. When scientists tried to find physical evidence inside the brain, they ended up completely divided. An early study from the University of Pennsylvania found what they called jaw-dropping physical differences in victims' brains. But then, years later, a much larger study by the National Institutes of Health found, no significant proof of injury on MRIs. This scientific controversy is still fueling the debate today. Okay, so with the science all over the place and no clear answers, three major theories emerged to try and explain what was causing Havana syndrome. And trust me, each one takes us in a completely different direction. So the leading theory, and the one that most officials are really afraid of, is a sophisticated weapon. Specifically, a device that uses pulsed microwaves to create the feeling of sound inside a person's head. It's a real phenomenon called the Frey effect. And a pretty prestigious National Academy of Sciences panel concluded this was the most plausible explanation. The second theory is that this is all psychological, basically a kind of mass hysteria that spreads through these high-stress, tight-knit communities of diplomats and spies. The FBI's own behavioral analysis unit actually leaned toward this conclusion, arguing that it was a kind of social contagion. And then came this totally unexpected, almost bizarre twist in the investigation. An elite scientific advisory group got a hold of audio recordings from the Havana incidents and analyzed them. Their conclusion? It wasn't a secret weapon. It was something way more ordinary. The high-pitched noise perfectly matched the mating call of the Indies' short-tailed cricket. Yeah, crickets. So, with theories ranging from secret weapons all the way to insects, is it really any surprise that the official government investigation has been just as conflicted and controversial as the science? I mean, this was a stunning assessment that absolutely infuriated the victims. 7 U.S. intelligence agencies all got together and concluded that it was very unlikely a foreign adversary was behind any of this. They basically said there was no credible evidence that any country even had such a weapon. To the victims, you can imagine, this felt like total gaslighting.
But a lot of investigators on the inside, people like Lieutenant Colonel Greg Edgreen, who actually led the Pentagon's inquiry, they came to a very different and much more direct conclusion. They were pretty sure the evidence pointed squarely at one specific adversary.
And they weren't the only ones. A bombshell media investigation by 60 Minutes and a few others laid out some really compelling circumstantial evidence. It tied members of a notorious Russian military intelligence unit, GRU Unit 29155, to the scenes of several attacks. Their travel records lined up perfectly with when and where incidents happened. They'd received awards for work on acoustic weapons, and some victims even identified them. So, all of this brings us right back to where we started. The most significant potential break in this case in a decade, a development that could finally prove one of the core theories right. It turns out, through a secret undercover operation, U.S. officials got their hands on a potential weapon. It's a portable, backpack-sized device that emits the exact kind of energy that was theorized to cause the symptoms. And it even contains Russian parts. For over a year now, they've been secretly testing it to see if it can actually reproduce the effects of Havana syndrome.
But even as investigators get closer to a potential answer, the human cost of this mystery just keeps mounting. The very first CIA officer to report symptoms, the man known as Patient Zero, he recently died. He never got a definitive explanation for the ailment that completely derailed his life.
This potential breakthrough could finally validate years of victim testimony and prove a weapon actually exists. But it leaves us with the most important and frankly the most chilling question of all. If this is the smoking gun, who has been pulling the trigger, invisibly, all over the world, and why?